This video is brought to you by Audible. Go to audibletrial.com/halocanon for a 30-day free trial and a free credit on an audiobook download. Stay tuned for more details. When Halo: Smoke and Shadow emerged on the scene in 2016, I knew that author Kelly Gay was someone I would have to keep an eye on going forward, and one I would eagerly await returning to Halo. Last month she did just that with a story that brings together a number of characters and plot threads from disparate media in a way that not only feels natural, but incredibly rewarding. But even more, she's able to do so in such a way that is both rewarding for longtime fans, but doesn't leave newcomers confused or isolated. That's not an easy task by any stretch. If you still haven't read Renegades, I have a spoiler-free review on my channel. Check the info box at the top right or the description box for a link to that. No spoiler-free wrap-up at the end this time. For everyone else, this is Halo: Renegades. Our story opens with a prologue from an unknown narrator. From what little we know, this narrator has to be a fractured, seemingly artificial mind. His ship crashed, killing his crew, and he somehow finds his way into an artificial body. This is of course the Forerunner Armiger on the cover, which immediately rules out Little Bit. As he is extracting the bodies to dig a mass grave, he contemplates many things. The words of a Forerunner theoretical, his culpability in the deaths of the crew, how human he still is, and time, his greatest friend and greatest enemy. He digs his grave while the crashed ship broadcasts a distress signal. After that, we get a report from Kip Silas, who you'll recall is former Cedrin Silas Kipley, recruited by Oni to spy on Ryan Forge. Seems Little Bit discovered Kip's true identity, forcing him to flee the ship. He reports on the events of Smoke and Shadow before noting that the Ace of Spades got away, to where he does not know. Stuck on Venezia, he requests immediate evac. Incidentally, I love the use of an after-action report as a way to refresh the reader's memory of the previous book. It feels natural and unintrusive, and even helps immerse the reader into the universe. But anyway, with that, we get into the real story. In May of 2557, we find Ryan, her surviving crew, and the Ace on a planet called Kamoya, which is basically a dirtier version of Venezia. All around, former ships have been converted into various districts, each filling a different service or need. You have the Chalibate, the unofficial capital, the Loren, a transport barge that's now public storage, and the erstwhile witch host Sabar, to name a few. As we learn, following Ace's return to Venezia, the modifications made by Little Bit, the fragment of the Halo Wars 1 Shield World's AI that Ryan recovered and its debris field, overloaded the slipspace drive and other systems. One of my criticisms of Smoke and Shadow involved the fact that Little Bit was able to make modifications at all without any consequence, or as it seemed at the time, as theoretically it should only be able to mess with software, not hardware. I don't know if Ms. Gay always intended to address that, but I'm glad she did. Anyway, Ryan fled to Kamoya to get her ship repaired and lie low since Oni was now on her tail. In the 5 weeks since her arrival, the Ace was repaired and ready to fly. She'd also reunited with Ram Chalva, the former captain of a rival salvage crew and friend of Ryan who had been tortured by Geklar. Ram had since joined Ryan's crew temporarily, of course, as he's not ready to captain again so soon. As we move along, it seems that Geklar has also decided to visit Kamoya, a bit of information Ryan was fed by Tavawan Kigyar Norfel, a dealer and broker on Venezia. The intel said that Gek was trying to get something at an auction hosted by a Yonhet trader named Eld. Interesting name. Well, odd behavior for Gek, known best for taking what he needed, it presented the perfect opportunity to get revenge against the Sangheili. Not by killing him, but by taking everything from him and breaking him. Within the HRB Flintlock, a former banking vessel that had become the city's financial district, Ryan prepared to infiltrate Eld's auction while the rest of her crew did what they needed to do. With Little Bit's help, they identified that a luminary recovered from the wreckage of the Shield World was still on Gek's ship, which was crewed by 5 Sangheili. It would be Ram's job to secure that luminary and get it back to the Ace. Ryan heads to Eld's auction house to try and get in, but is held up by Tommen, another Yonhet that works for Eld. She managed to talk her way in, Tommen running a credit check to make sure she had money to spend. Ryan had deliberately waited until the day of the auction to do this, knowing that the credit check would be flagged by Oni. At least by doing it day of, she'd have a chance to escape. The check passes and Ryan enters the auction house. Inside, she meets her fellow auctioneers, a couple humans, a pair of Jiralhane, 4 Kigyar, and of course, Geklar. Gek spots Ryan and stomps right over, shoving the Jiralhane out of the way, the other groups moving out of the way. and grabs Ryan by the throat. Ryan had planned for this and hoped that the house rules enforced by Eld would save her. While she waits for Eld to appear, she slaps her hand around Geck's shoulder and breast as if trying to get him to let go. In truth, a specially designed glove created by Nico and Little Bit was reading the residual light on Geck's datapad screen, seeing what was most recently there. Finally though, Eld shows up and at gunpoint orders Geck to put Ryan down. He does so begrudgingly and the bidding soon begins. One item this time, a working harvester. And of course, I'm almost certain that's the same harvester we see in Spartan Ops, but I digress. Ryan pretends to put in a serious bid as others bid around her, but ultimately Geck takes the win, wanting the harvester Ryan guesses for something he found in the debris of the shield world. With the auction concluded, Ryan gets the hell out of Dodge before Geck can finish his transaction. She contacts her crew who confirm that they have the Luminary and begins to head to her ship. As she's resolving to tell the UNSC or even Agent Han, the Oni agent after her, about the harvester and Geck, she's hooded, bound, and taken. Ryan soon finds herself on a Pelican along with Nico, hearing that the Ace had been secured. Desperate for something to go her way, Ryan informs the two Oni agents about Geck Lar and his recent purchase. With Ryan's direction, they find Geck's ship and head out, leaving Ryan and Nico to be taken to a ship in orbit, the UNSC Taurocado. On board, Ryan and Nico find the Ace of Spades has been brought in. They're reunited with Ram and Lessa and brought before Agent Han. Han tries to strike a deal with Ryan, but she's not so eager to cooperate as people in her line of business tend to be. Mostly she's curious why Han would need anything from her as he has everything of hers, her ship, her accounts, her warehouses, and Little Bit. But Han reveals that Little Bit is being uncooperative. Initially, Ryan is happy to hear this, but soon realizes something horrible. Before she can speak though, Han leaves the room to let Ryan think about whether she wants to cooperate or not. Over an hour later, Han returns with one of Ryan's kidnappers, a tall man who is part of a team called Apollo, and Kip Silas. And pausing a moment in case you hadn't figured it out, the tall man who kidnapped Ryan, Dylan Novak, and the woman who kidnapped Nico, the two who went after Geck, are indeed members of Fireteam Apollo, the same Spartan fire team from the Halo Legendary Crate's Intel. Back when they had Intel. The fourth Legendary Crate from Series 1 featured intel mentioning Fireteam Apollo going to the Shield World debris field. That was set in June of 2557 though, just a month after the current part of the book. Spoilers aside though, it's awesome to see Apollo make an appearance, and in such a way that doesn't really identify quote-unquote our Spartan from the Legendary Crates. You see 343, that is how you handle a character with no set identity.
The Noble Six!
Excuse me. Moving on, Kip appeals to Ryan to cooperate, which she intends to do at this point, and reveals that the Spartans lost Geck. Needless to say, Ryan is upset, at Oni for missing out on Geck, and at Kip for being a traitor. Kip reveals what he lost on Cedra as he continues to make his case, which does quiet Ryan for a moment. But then Han reveals that he needs more than the Shield World debris' location now, but also everything Ryan has on her father, Sergeant Forge. Ryan lunges at Han, managing to get in a single punch before Spartan Novak interferes. He gets her away from Han and encourages her to take today's loss and live to fight another day. Ryan gives Oni what they want, and the Ace of Spades is allowed to leave, intact other than what Oni took from within. On board the Taurocado, Han and Spartan Novak watch. We learn that the two have a long history together, going back to working together on Borneo Station, when both were, quote, wet behind the ears. We also learn that their shipboard AI, Turk, had tried to interact with Little Bit, but ended up getting lost in the AI fragment's jumbled alien framework. Only with cooperation from Forge had Turk been freed. On board the Ace, Ryan lays in a course for Venezia before heading to her private quarters. She sees the signs of Oni everywhere, and when examining the drawer that had contained everything she had on her father, she almost breaks down. But then she remembers her special glove from Nico and removes it, forming a plan as she does. 4 days later on Venezia, Ryan meets with Norfell to borrow a bug sweeper to scan her ship for Oni listening and monitoring devices, several of which had been removed from her and her crew during security scans as they approached Nor's place, including under their skin. Nor agrees, enjoying Ryan owing her favors, and further reveals that she managed to save one thing from Ryan's Venezian warehouse before it was taken by Oni. And I mean literally taken, as in literally yanked into the sky. A small data core containing a salvaged mining facility superintendent, salvage worth a small fortune. After parting ways with Norfell, Ryan and crew are at a bistro/bar in New Tyne. Ryan reveals her plan of action. Nico will work with Nor's crew to scrub the ship of bugs, Lessa will meet with a broker named Rouse to sell the data core and use half the money for fuel and supplies, Rom using the rest for star charts, the previous nav data having been erased before Oni boarded the Ace, and on Tech to get the information acquired by Ryan's scanning glove, information she'd been collecting since the auction and up to and including their time on the Tower Daco. 5 days later, the ship is stocked and spaceworthy, and Nico had pulled everything he could off Ryan's glove. The scan of Gexpad had the Sangheili's plans for the Harvester and communications with Jul 'Mdama, Dama, a Sangheili unknown to our characters. The big find though was a scan of Spartan Novak's datapad, which revealed information regarding an incident on a planet called Jerinose A in the Ibicus system. Not much detail other than the words, proceed with extreme caution, high value asset, containment protocol BKW-112, secure access to the site, do not engage, and details about a ComSat being used to block distress signals coming from the planet. The crew figures they can find whatever is on Jerinose A, salvage it, and use it to barter with Oni to get their stuff back. Ryan is unsure at first, worried about how Oni would react, how it would affect those that she cared for. But ultimately, with her crew's support, she agrees to the plan. We briefly cut away from Ryan and her crew to join our mysterious narrator from the prologue, now confirmed to be none other than the AI known as Chakas, or 343 Guilty Spark. As I'm sure some of you have put together, the prologue was set just after the UNSC Rubicon had crashed on Jerinose A. 3 years have passed since then, during which Chakas had been remembering, putting things together in his head. His time as a human, his time as Guilty Spark, and what he was now. Now he inhabited an Armiger, the one on the cover, and he still has a purpose, finding the Librarian. Moving on, we find ourselves at Voy on Earth in June of 2557, with Oni director Annabelle Richards, who you may recall from Halo Hunters in the Dark. This book is just pulling from all over the place, and boy are we in a treat for references. Annabelle Richards is the director of Project Bookworm, which had been started following 2 key discoveries. First was an artifact known as the Born Stellar Relation, found by Hugo Barton and his research team on Shield World 006, formerly known as Onyx, in 2554. The second was 343 Guilty Spark's testimony to the crew of the UNSC Rubicon, recovered in 2555. If you aren't aware, these are the in-universe sources for Halo Cryptum and Halo Primordium, respectively. Under Annabelle Richards, who compartmentalized Bookworm so that few would know its true nature and secrets, Oni had been preparing to find, interrogate, and study Guilty Spark. Richard emerges onto a tarmac where she meets with Captain Hollier, captain of the Eclipse-class prowler Bad Moon Rising and leader of the mission to retrieve 343 Guilty Spark from Jerinose A. Accompanied by a 6-man artifact recovery team, a trauma med, and a smart AI named Thea, they would be deployed with a special containment unit for Spark. And if he tried to take over the Bad Moon Rising like he had the Rubicon, the ship would self-destruct. Richards and Hollier say goodbye, and while the Prowler takes off, Richard meets up with Dr. William Iqbal. Dr. Iqbal also appeared in Hunters in the Dark, but is best known from his first appearance in Halo Evolutions as From the Office of Dr. William Arthur Iqbal. Anyway, Richards and Iqbal talk, Iqbal confident at the success of the mission, and when asked about it by Richards, confident that Spark's tale is unreliable, a conclusion agreed upon by Oni Statistical Analysis AI, or StatBots. Richards, on the other hand, isn't so sure. She believes that Spark wants to return to Earth, and having seen what a rampant AI can do firsthand, is understandably worried. We then join Spartan Novak on the Tau Rocado, and basically get to see the Loot Crate intel play out. Seriously, all of this intel is on Halopedia, read it if you haven't already. Anyway, by the time we join up with Novak, the Tau Rocado is at Site 37, where they find a piece of Spirit of Fire's hull plating, along with samples of flood biomass throughout the field. Novak, for his part, feels guilty about having taken all of Ryan's belongings, especially anything connected to the Spirit or her father. Perhaps just as bad or worse, they'd all see, thanks to Little Bit, what the Spirit's crew had done, what Forge had done, to save humanity. It didn't sit right with him to keep that from the families of the Spirit's crew. Suddenly though, a Covenant battle group shows up and deploys Seraph fighters. Fireteam Apollo, at the moment comprised of Novak and Spartans Adam Serra and Danielle Reed, deploy in broadsword fighters. They take on the Seraphs while the Tau Rocado recovers its drones and drops a buoy. The Spartans are more than successful in their engagements and even spot the Harvester in use, but they're forced to retreat once the Prowler does what it needs to do. Spartans and drones aboard, the Prowler slips away. On board the Ace of Spades, the crew makes the 3-week trip to Jerinose A. While they do, we get some great character introspection into brother and sister, Nico and Lessa. While both had a small bit of backstory in Smoke and Shadow, it was limited, likely due to that story being a novella. With a full novel this time around, Kelly Gay can really dive into their characters, and she takes full advantage of that. After Ryan's warehouse had literally been ripped from the ground by Oni, Nico and Lessa, who also had precious items on storage in the container, were understandably upset, Nico even more so, taking it out on Lessa. Lessa's items had been old clothes and a blanket supposedly from their parents. A comforting fiction as she herself puts it, but Nico calls her out on it. He later regrets this, but still can't stand how Lessa doesn't appear to mourn the loss of Cade, former engineer and second in command of the Ace of Spades. Meanwhile, Lessa is indeed mourning Cade, just in her own way, in private. Cade had been the father she'd never had, a man who accepted everything she was and never made her feel lesser for it. She and Nico had been born and grown up on Ilaria, which you may remember from Halo Nightfall, and they'd had to become scam artists and thieves to survive. But that was fine with Cade, and she'd loved him for that. Now with him gone, Lessa had a choice before her: stay with the Ace of Spades or strike it out on her own. We then jump forward to when the Ace arrives in the Ibicus system. As they approach Jerinose, Rom mentions that he'd been looking over the information from Gek's datapad, which mentions him wanting to attack Earth with whatever he digs up in the debris field. We know from previous sources that Gek would attack Earth in December of 2557, after which he was captured and held at Midnight Facility before escaping, and of course, the events of Spartanops. They also talk about the Covenant refugees on Earth, Ungoi, Kigyar, and Sangheli asylum seekers. This was something mentioned back in episode 1 of Spartanops and sadly hasn't come up until now. It's a real shame, as it's something that really needs to be fleshed out. Another thing that comes up, not really central to the plot, is a little piece of in-universe folk music that basically talks about how, no matter where humanity goes, they'll always have something of a nostalgic yearn for Earth. Written up by an early colonist named Mary Parker Mead, it's just a wonderful piece of world building. One of those things that breathes real life into a universe, makes it feel lived in. Again, no connection to the core plot, just a passing connection to the characters, something that exists in the universe. And it's absolutely wonderful. Moving on though, as the Ace arrives in Jerinose, Ryan has Nico disable and salvage the Oni comsat with a drone he affectionately calls Michelle, then scans the planet. They find the source of the transmission and, oddly, some tracks, indicating something had survived on a planet with barely any atmosphere. Curious, Ryan, Nico, and Lessa head to the surface. They find the transmission antenna and follow the cords hooked up to it to a cave, outside of which are fresh footprints. Inside, they discover a makeshift home constructed from wreckage. A serial number on a piece of titanium plating reveals to Nico that this was the UNSC Rubicon, a science vessel. However, the big find is a large, humanoid metal body that we know to be an Armiger inhabited by Chakas. Funnily, while trying to identify it, Nico wonders if it might be some kind of new Spartan android. With no other leads on what Oni could be looking for, they grab up the robot and head back to the Ace of Spades. They drop off what they'd collected, including the Armiger, and head back out to see if they can find a data core. While they're out, Chakas awakens, or fully awakens as he's been aware of what's been happening the entire time, and looks around at his new surroundings. The fact that he was picked up by salvagers briefly brings forth memories of his time as a human. As he begins interacting with the ship, seeing all the improvements he can make, he comes across Ryan's past and the name Spirit of Fire. A memory briefly comes forward, then retreats. Can't wait to see what that's about. Chakas briefly considers doing to the Ace and the crew what he did to the Rubicon, but decides against it given how that ended, and returns to the storage container from whence he came. The crew returns, most staying on the ship, Ryan deciding to leave for a third pilgrimage. While Nico is sorting their salvage in the cargo bay, Chakas decides to reveal himself, which understandably freaks the kid out. The two have a brief exchange though, introducing each other before Ryan, Lessa, and Rom appear, weapons aimed at Chakas. Nico tries to defend him, but no one is having it until Chakas thanks Ryan for saving him. It doesn't really calm things, but it does catch her off guard. They ask Chakas what he is doing and he reveals that he's infiltrated their systems, much to Ryan's annoyance. She also interrogates him about the Rubicon and its fate, which doesn't impart much confidence in anyone. Before they can continue, however, an Oni ship appears in nearby space. Chakas suggests taking off, but Ryan resists as she's skeptical of the mechanical being. Chakas ultimately decides just to take control anyway and slip away, which only further angers Ryan. When asked, Chakas explains that he's taking them to the Etran harborage. Now, if you aren't aware, that's the shield world from Halo Wars, now nothing more than a debris field, so Chakas is in for a bit of a surprise. Looking at the crew of the Ace, Chakas considers that as he kidnaps them, he's doing what was once done to him. He then says that while he cannot and will not be imprisoned, he shall neither imprison the Ace's crew. Of course, all evidence to the contrary as far as Ryan is concerned. Chakas responds that yes, while he is forcing the crew somewhere they don't want to go, he's offering the salvage of a lifetime from the harborage. Nico interjects, again asking of the AI's origins if it was once human as it claimed, and as he answers, the entire secret history of humanity is revealed. A former spacefaring race on par with the Forerunners, the war with the Forerunners, the loss, what it cost, and of course, Chakas' time as 343 Guilty Spark. At this revelation, Ryan heads to the bridge for a stiff drink, and I don't blame her. The rest of the crew soon follows. Nico is overall rather excited for the potential of another Forerunner AI companion, but everyone else remains skeptical. Meanwhile on Earth, director Annabelle Richards is understandably upset about losing 343 Guilty Spark to a group of salvagers. However, she's given some hope when contacted by Agent Han. Though he was the one who put Ryan Forge on the revenge path, he did know the world of the outer colonies and salvagers and had a plan to make a deal with Forge when she re-emerged on the scene. Feeling elated, Richards goes to the roof of her facility to see the African plain, a new Mombasa being rebuilt, and the accession site, the portal to the Ark. During this, we learn the true purpose of Project Bookworm. While Richards' directive is to interview 343 Guilty Spark and find the truth of his words about the survival of the Librarian, the deeper goal is to gain access to the domain. So I think we need to pause again here and dive into what all this means, assuming you haven't read the Forerunner saga. The Forerunner saga's books all have in-universe artifacts. As already stated, Halo Cryptum is an artifact known as the Born-Stellar Relation, discovered on the Onyx Shield world. Halo Primordium was related to the crew of the UNSC Rubicon before 343 Guilty Spark hijacked it and apparently left a complete recording of his testimony floating in space to be recovered. And Halo Silentium are strings of testimony extracted from a Forerunner catalog agent, also discovered on the Onyx Shield world. Through these discoveries, Oni learned of the domain, the 100 billion years of knowledge it contained, its fate as of the Halo Array's firing, and the final effort of the Librarian to preserve it. Now, we as fans know that the domain was saved, though not in the form that the Forerunners knew it. Still, Oni looking for it is a pretty big reveal. And as we learn, Oni discovered the fossilized remains of the Librarian's catalog in the Ross-Ziegler blip, a geological layer absent of fossils, mostly, discovered in 2332 on Earth and on several colonies, dating back to 100,000 years ago, and obviously reclassified as a result of the Halo Array later on. But they did not find the Librarian. One then can't help but wonder if there's some truth in Spark's claim of the Librarian having survived, as does director Richards, and also wondering what else the Librarian may have done to ensure the domain's survival. God damn, this book is a lore nerd's wet dream. Moving on, we rejoin the crew of Ace of Spades as they arrive at the Etran harborage, only to find the debris field and Covenant fighters to the surprise of no one but Chakas. Ryan takes control and manages to evade the Seraphs, giving time for her to realize that Chakas didn't know about the harborage's destruction, and for Ryan to reveal that it was destroyed by the Spirit of Fire. That was what Chakas had almost remembered earlier. Things don't stay quiet for long though, as Seraphs spot them, and the chase is on again. To make things worse, the crew finds an entire Covenant fleet led by Gek, who briefly hails Ryan simply to laugh at her. Just as it seems they're about to be destroyed though, a UNSC fleet slips in, launching nukes and missiles everywhere to destroy the Covenant salvagers and the debris field. If the UNSC can't have it, they'll ensure that no one else can. Ryan briefly takes the opportunity to hail Gek and taunt him before attempting to get the hell out of there. Chakas is ultimately forced to take over, only barely saving the crew. Hours later, he asks to make a deal with Forge. He helps them if they help him. He explains that he wants to go to Earth but doesn't want to do so in Oni captivity. He also knows that Ryan wants her stuff back from Oni. He proposes that, at their new destination, he can use what's called an upgrade seed to greatly enhance Ryan's ship. Basically do what Littlebit tried to do, but have it work. Ryan still doesn't trust him though, more than understandably. So, Chakas leaves Ryan and the crew with his complete history, from his time as a human, to Monitor, to now. Though upset, Ryan is curious and listens to Chakas' tale. After being treated to basically the Forerunner saga and some change, the crew is awestruck. Nico of course wants to help Chakas out more than ever, while Lessa wants to be done with the AI. The two fight once more before Lessa leaves, but Nico goes after her at Ryan's insistence. Rom meanwhile is lost in thought, so Ryan heads to the cargo bay where Chakas is digging through what the crew recovered from Jerinose A. Ryan asks where they're being taken and what he needs them for. Chakas reveals that their destination is called Treneil, a name certainly new to us, and that he needs them to do what you often need a reclaimer for, to activate Forerunner tech. Further, he offers to help Ryan find her father in the Spirit of Fire. As he said before, a trade. Despite herself, Ryan can't help but sympathize with Chakas, even offering condolences for all that Chakas went through. After their conversation, Ryan leaves him alone. A couple days later, Ryan wakes up to find Nico working on an avatar for Chakas, like what human AI use. She also notices that Chakas' soldier body seems to be changing. He reveals that he's transfiguring, which is to say, he's utilizing the metal in machine cells to alter his appearance. Chakas doesn't want to keep his soldier look. Eventually, Lessa and Nico finally land on an avatar, an Armiger, though one more capable of expressing. They also land on a new name, as the AI is no longer Chakas or 343 Guilty Spark. From here on out, he is simply Spark. In the days to follow, Spark's avatar appears throughout the ship, helping the crew where he can. Rom with repairs and upgrades, Nico with his drones, and Lessa with nav charts. With Ryan, he observes, until finally asking why she continues to look for her father, what she would do if she discovers he was dead. She simply says that she has to try, and if he is dead, well, she'd be glad to at least know the truth. Spark then shifts the conversation back to his proposal from days before. Ryan finally accepts. As the chapter comes to a close, we discover that Spark does know the fate of Sergeant Forge, keeping that truth from Ryan. We then jump forward a bit as Ace of Spades drops out of slipspace near Treneil in July of 2557. Let it just sink in that this book is now at the doorstep of Halo 4's start. Approaching Treneil, a world half again the size of Earth, Spark brings the Ace towards a builder facility where he can make the upgrade seed needed for the human ship. Along the way, we get to see how nature has reclaimed Treneil, with huge overgrowth up and along various Forerunner constructs. We also learn the horrible truth of Treneil. During the Forerunner Flood War, it had fallen in the path of the Flood, and so its population had pumped a toxin through the air, killing anything and everything the Flood could feed on. In short, Treneil is a graveyard world. Naturally, the crew are more than a little horrified at this, but they carry on. Upon arriving at the facility, Spark has Ryan touch a holopad which activates it. He then gathers a slipspace flake and sets the facility to work on constructing the upgrade seed. For context, a slipspace flake is what Forerunner ships use to power their slipspace drives. Flakes would be cut from large crystals at facilities where ships were grown, and yes, Forerunner ships are grown, and those large crystals were cut from the source crystal, which was kept at a secret location known only to those who cut the crystal for shipbuilding facilities. So you have the source crystal from which chunks are cut off, and from those, slipspace flakes are carved. While the upgrade seed is being made, Ryan and crew start their salvage process. As they do, they come across a Forerunner home, their armors sitting on the tables as though they'd been sitting down for dinner, their helmets off. Nearby, they find another Forerunner armor at a terminal. Nico activates it, finding a last message. With Spark's help, they translate it. The Forerunner talks about the encroaching Flood threat, and their plan to kill the 883,489,876 members of Treneil's population to spite the Flood. Once the message finishes, Spark reports that the upgrade seed is ready and they head back to the seed lab, and eventually off-planet. Treneil to be left alone once more. From there, Ace heads to Myers Moon, a common waypoint for them to rest, restock, and refuel, and where they spend some time enjoying a secluded beach. The next day, Ryan links up to Waypoint to check trader and salvage channels. She finds messages from Nor, a bounty on her head courtesy of Gek, and a message from Agent Han speaking about a trade. Ryan is about as thrilled as you would imagine, not one to believe in Oni's spook. She doesn't just want her stuff back, she wants Oni to leave her and her crew alone. She soon finds Nico and Lessa fishing, Spark observing not too far away. Spark and her briefly talk, Ryan noting the changes from his transfiguration, before Spark suddenly stands, his arm transforming into a weapon and firing into the sea. Ryan asks about the ability, which Spark reveals he'd only been able to do since repairing himself on Treneil. Surprisingly, Ryan doesn't seem at all shocked or upset. She simply gathers her crew to talk about Agent Han and his deal. Ryan reveals Han's message to her crew and her intentions. She wants to finally use the upgrade seed and try to basically pull one over on Oni. After a short discussion, everyone is on board though. While the upgrade seed works, Spark enacts his own plan. He uses the communications satellite around Myers Moon to contact, surprise surprise, a member of Catalog, a surviving member of the Triad that had collected testimony from the Didact, the Librarian, and the Isodidact, a catalog that we're actually familiar with. Yes, this is the same catalog that was posting on the Waypoint forums back in 2014 and 2015. Now, if you aren't aware, back in 2014, a profile on Halo Waypoint named Catalog started posting and answering questions asked by the community. I actually made a whole video series going over the answers at the time they released. The posts continued fairly regularly into 2015, with a small narrative seemingly emerging over time. Sadly, the posts and the narrative came to a premature ending, but hey, our boy is back, at least a little. Anyway, back to the story. Spark asks for access to juridical records of catalog Trian number 879 prior to the activation of the Halo array in 97,445 BCE. Catalog denies Spark his access, saying, "I did not give the Didact himself access, why would I give it to you?" So yeah, this is after the Didact's awakening and then getting blown into a slipspace portal. We know this not only because of Catalog's words, but back on Waypoint, Catalog noted that the Didact tried to access the juridical network back during his attack on Earth. Anyway, Spark asks again, Catalog says no, and Spark ends the transmission quite upset. Kinda reminds me of a certain terminal from Halo 3. We then jump forward to August of 2557, finding Ryan and crew on a planet called Binterol, a backwater world frequented by traders, salvagers, and pirates, much like Kamoya but even worse. With the Ace upgraded, Ryan and crew set to work preparing for Agent Han and unloading the salvage into a nearby warehouse for selling. We learned during this that the crew caught word of the attack on New Phoenix, currently said to be a Covenant attack. Ryan also reached out to Norfell for help, who agreed only after Ryan said she might get some of the bounty from Gek by revealing Ryan's location. And then they wait. After 6 days, Ryan and Han meet in Port Joyce Square. They make the agreed exchange. Ryan and crew get their personal belongings. Ryan hands over the salvage from Jerinose A, including a data core. This is of course meant to be Spark's data core, but it's a fake that Spark helped create, not that Han is too familiar with what they're looking for. As the exchange concludes, Han trying to make an additional offer from Oni, 6 elites sent by Gek are seen making their way through the streets. A band of Kigyar also appear along with human bounty hunters, all after the bounty on Ryan's head. A group of Oni spooks also appear from a nearby bar. Nico and Lessa manage to get away while Spartan Novak tries to arrest Ryan. She tries to escape, but Novak being a Spartan, she's less than successful. Ultimately, Spark has to intervene and rescue her. Once back on the Ace, they pick up Nico and Lessa before preparing to head to space for a jump-out system. On board the Tau Rocado, they spot the Ace, Han wanting to destroy the ship. Spartan Novak argues against this as illegal salvage and lying are death sentences. Captain Kara instead decides on a warning shot across the bow. In response, Rom gives Spark control of the ship to take advantage of its new upgrades. The Ace moves away at impressive speed into a slipspace portal that appears out of nowhere and disappears. Once away, the crew heads into the medical bay to check on Ryan, who is being healed with the help of nanotech. Yes, nanomachines are used in 26th century medicine. They toast to a successful mission and toast to thank Spark for his help. We jump forward again to September 1st, where the Tau Rocado and Bad Moon Rising are returning to Earth. Director Annabelle Richards is excited to get her hands on what they think is the Spark fragment, but upset about a distortion in the video of Ryan Forge's escape on Binterol. The AI Thea had been unable to clean up the video, so Richards asks for it to be sent to their facility AI, Ferguson. Meanwhile, in Sol's asteroid belt, the Ace of Spades makes its approach on Earth. Upon landing, the crew disembarks for their long walk to the Oni facility. Before that though, Rom, Nico, and Lessa take in all the beauty of Earth. Spark meanwhile records what he sees, recognizing his home, but seeing all that has changed and remembering the last time he was here over 100,000 years ago. A few moments pass, and the group departs. Back in the Void facility, Director Richards watches the cleaned up footage of the fight on Binterol. Soon she comes across the part where Spark saved Ryan. Though she didn't know it Spark immediately, she recognizes the Armiger shape from her experience on the Ark, and then that the data core they'd received was a fake. She orders Ferguson to shut down the facility but gets no response. She radios and soon meets with Dr. Iqbal, but it's too late. The facility starts to shut down thanks to viral code in the video file. It had been infected by the fake core before it was contained, and in turn infected Thea and Ferguson when the AIs had tried to clean it up. Now it was in the Void facility. Meanwhile, Spark leads Ryan and crew deep beneath Mwenzi, one of Mount Kilimanjaro's peaks. There they find a Forerunner facility that had been constructed from a Retriever Sentinel that had been sent to Earth to construct the portal at Void over 100,000 years ago. Ryan of course activates terminals in the facility along the way for Spark. Eventually they come to a divide, using light bridges to get across. Reaching the other side, Spark prepares to deactivate the bridges, letting the crew fall to their deaths. but his human emotions prevent it, further guilting him into upholding his side of their bargain. And so, he reveals the truth of Forge's father. Naturally, Ryan is more than a little upset, lashing out at Spark, even saying he has no idea how she feels. You can probably imagine Spark's response, given that he lost all his friends, lost his life, and the 100,000 years of loneliness after seeing the entire galaxy wiped out. However, before they can continue their fight, Agent Han, Spartan Novak, this time in full Mjolnir, and several soldiers show up. As we learn later, the AI Thea had detected a strange signal coming from Mount Kilimanjaro, likely from the Ace of Spades. Spark disables the light bridge at Ryan's request, and then leaves. Within the facility, Spark finds an imprint of the Librarian. She did indeed die, but left this remnant as she had on Requiem. The two talk, Spark wanting to find his two friends, Riser and Vinavira, again, either coaxing them out of other humans' geisha, or sending Spark to the domain to find the memories of them that live there. But the Librarian dissuades him of these notions. She points out that Spark has found friends in the Ace of Spades crew, people he can care for. She also reveals that the Didact awoke and that after their conversation, she will depart for the Absolute Record to prepare humanity to uphold the mantle. And then, perhaps, Bastion. She leaves Spark with an unknown key and then asks him to make a choice. Stay with his friends or come with her to the Absolute Record. Spark decides to stay. And boy do we need to talk about this. 7 years in the making and we finally get the meeting between the Librarian and Spark. A lot in the lore community never thought the Librarian actually survived, and for years several of us thought that we would see Chanta Green return, a Forerunner Lifeworker who inherited the title of Lifeshaper. So we had figured that Spark got the title confused and whatnot, right? Then Halo Fractures came along and dashed that theory, so the only conclusion was another imprint of her, and that turns out to be correct. Further though, this one says, quote, "This imprint will join the others already gone to the Absolute Record." So we know of one from Requiem that would go in the months to follow. But others? Where else might the Librarian have left imprints? That's going to be fun to speculate on for a while. And finally we have Bastion name dropped. Bastion was first mentioned in Halo 5 with some cut dialogue suggesting that it was a shield world, but again cut dialogue. I'm not going to speculate too much here, but it seems like Bastion is key, or at least important, in humanity claiming the mantle. It's a long shot, but I hope this means that the plot thread isn't going to be dropped in Halo Infinite. So damn, a lot of awesome stuff going on here, and I can't wait to see this followed up on. Hopefully at least somewhat in the next Halo game, but we'll see. For now, back to the story. Spark returns to the fight, collapsing a part of the cavern to cut off the UNSC advance, then disabling the light bridge once it was unoccupied. He then returns to the Ace crew and uses a translocation panel to get them out of the cave. He summons the Ace of Spades and everyone gets on board. Back at the Oni Voy facility, Director Richards is trying to get comms back online when the entire facility just turns back on. Ferguson is also online and it reveals that whatever had intruded just seems to have disappeared with no damage done or any trace left. Richards has the AI submit himself for inspection and begins issuing orders to get the facility back on track. Sometime later on board the Ace, Ryan emerges from her room and soon finds Spark, much to her annoyance. Spark apologizes for keeping the secret of her father's fate and reveals how he discovered that information. It seems that the Spirit of Fire engaged in regular data drops, hoping to leave a trail. A recovered data drop contained a final message from Sergeant Forge for his daughter, for Ryan. Spark sends the message to Ryan's datapad in her quarters. She returns and listens to her father's final words, letting out 26 years of emotional baggage. It's a heart-wrenching moment that no summary could do justice. Suffice it to say, Forge says that he's proud of everything he knows Lucy, Ryan, would be, and Ryan, more than ever, is sure of her place among the stars. In the days after, Oni begins to examine the newly discovered facility under Kilimanjaro. Meanwhile, Ryan and crew, surprisingly still on Earth, perform a farewell ceremony for those they lost, with Spark singing a farewell to them and his lost companions. Afterwards, Ryan asks about why he left and why he came back. He answers and reveals too that the box he got is a coordinate key to, quote, a safe place. The two then promise no more secrets, though Spark's inner monologue reveals this isn't 100% true. The crew then finally leave Earth and soon discuss what to do going forward. Ryan resolves to find the Spirit of Fire, to which Spark agrees to help, and notes that the salvage from Treneil is more than enough to keep them going. After that, they can do whatever they want. The crew drinks to that proposition. The book then comes to a close with Spartan Novak receiving a message from Forge, revealing Geklar's intent to attack a refugee settlement in Quito on Earth, telling him, quote, "Don't mess it up this time." And that concludes Halo Renegades. Goddamn, this book is a masterpiece of disparate lore coming together for an amazing ride. We have Annabelle Richards from Hunters in the Dark, the continuation of Chalkus' story from Primordium, confirmation of the Librarian's fate with mentions of her other imprint on Requiem from Spartan Ops and others, and even more, all coming together in a story that starts out as a search for the missing spirit of fire. On paper, this sounds like a hodgepodge of storylines just coming together to conclude them after years spent in limbo, but damn does Kelly Gay make it work. In addition, she introduces a ton of new lore that further fleshes out a universe more than 18 years in the making now. What really stood out to me was the folk hero colonist, Mary Parker Reed, and her song about longing for Earth. Again, it adds this layer of realism to the universe that I could say was otherwise somewhat absent. And to top it off, we get a solid story arc. It's clear that things aren't over yet. There's more story to tell, either in a book or elsewhere. Hopefully in Infinite, and whatever comes after. Needless to say, I can't wait. As far as criticism, I only have two major points of content. First is the inconsistent dating system. Sometimes it just says month and year, other times it gives a specific date. It's just kind of odd. The other is that I'm kind of sad that some of these stories, especially Sparks, is likely to stay in the books and never see the light of day in the games, which I think is what 343 was originally going for. However, that's not something I'm going to necessarily hold against the book. If you've seen my spoiler-free review, you know what comes next. And in the months since release, my opinion of Renegades hasn't changed, and so, once again, I can only give it a 10 out of 10. This book is goddamn perfect. If you haven't read it yet, do so now. Even if you really haven't read other Halo books before, this book is more than worth your while and will not leave you isolated. So that wraps up this review. I've given my thoughts, now let me know yours in the comments below. And let me know what you think of doing a spoiler-free review at book's release, with an in-depth one a month or so later. Where possible, I'd like to continue doing this. That's all for now, but with the next Halo novel not coming out until September, at least at the moment, I should finally have time to review Retribution and Legacy of Onyx, and finally be caught up on Halo books. Look forward to those over the summer. For now, this has been Halo Canon, and I'll see you next time when we talk about the currently active Spartan 3s. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this, be sure to check out Audible. By going to audibletrial.com/halocanon, you can get a 30-day free trial and a free audiobook. Audible's selection is unmatched and includes all the Halo novels. You can cancel at any time and keep any audiobooks you've purchased. So check out audibletrial.com/halocanon today.